It's said that back in the last century in America, there was an old folk performance where a living person would be locked in a dungeon and starved for over 10 days. As the audience gradually arrived, the carnival owner would claim this was a mysterious creature rarely seen in 100 years. Then he would throw a live chicken down into the pit. The starving man's eyes would gleam like a beast hunting its prey as he lunged for the chicken. Amid the crowd's jeers and shouts, his face grew more and more savage until he bit into the chicken's neck with a gruesome crunch, drinking its blood raw. And that wasn't all. This circus was filled with all kinds of freaks. A snake man whose joints could twist in any direction, a tiny man with incredible strength, and this woman who could channel tens of thousands of volts of electricity through her hands. Among these freaks, the protagonist, Stanton, was the only normal person. He had no special abilities, but with his handsome face, he caught the eye of the fortune teller, Xena. The so-called fortune telling involved having the audience write their thoughts on slips of paper. Stanton would collect them, and then Xena would burn them to ashes before reading aloud what had been written. In fact, the real slips had already been swapped in advance by Stanton and handed to Xena's husband, Pete, under the stage. Then, Pete would write the contents on a blackboard, and through a pane of glass, Xena could see them. This simple trick made the couple a fortune. One night, emboldened by drink, they decided to show Stanton something even more impressive. Pete and Xena brought out their real skill. Pete closed his eyes, turned his back, and asked Stanton to hand any random object to Xena.
Please concentrate on this object I have in my hand, Professor.
This time there was no cue card, yet Pete accurately described the object as a watch, down to its material and style. He even knew the watch didn't belong to Stanton, but was something Stanton had stolen. Stanton was completely stunned. Just then, Pete seemed to sense something terrifying and abruptly ended the demonstration. Stanton pressed Pete to explain how it was done. Pete proudly pulled a notebook from his pocket. All the secrets were written inside. Inside was a system of coded communication Pete had invented. Every gesture of his hands represented a question, while Xena's words were broken into keywords, each carrying hidden meanings.
Object 21, emphasis on concentrate means that it is old and worn down. Cheap.
As for why he said the watch was stolen, that was based on experience and judgment of the style. As long as they memorized the contents of the notebook, they could perform what looked like mind reading. Stanton resolved to master this skill, but Pete refused to teach him.
It can be misused. I got shut-eye. It's why I stopped doing the act, because now he believes it's all true.
Though Stanton claimed he wouldn't pursue it, in secret, he began practicing on his own. Meanwhile, Clem, a collector of strange specimens, had a vast array of oddities, even a fully preserved baby soaked in formaldehyde. But that wasn't the most twisted thing. What he was most proud of was turning people step by step into those who would tear apart a live chicken. When Stanton asked how it was done, Clem explained, "First, find a drunk vagrant at a train station or in an alley, offer him a drink laced with certain substances, then tell him there's an easy temporary job. Just pretend to be a freak inside a cage. After that, deliberately leave them alone, saying they're not ready yet. That night, they would obsess over how to act like a freak, growling, shaking, screaming, crawling. Next, bring in a large audience. No matter what living thing is thrown in, the man would devour it raw, and the crowd wouldn't care whether he was man or beast. They'd gladly pay for such a shocking spectacle. Stanton was fascinated by all this. That night, he decided to bring a gift to Pete. Pete was craving alcohol and asked Stanton to fetch some, but Stanton sneaked into Clem's room, stopping in front of the preserved baby. Soon after, Stanton returned with a bottle of liquid. Then, while Pete slept, he secretly flipped through the notebook, but Pete caught him red-handed and scolded him fiercely. The next day, Pete was found dead on the street, yet Stanton couldn't stop thinking about that notebook. He rushed to the basement to look for it. No one expected that Stanton had a natural gift. In no time, he mastered everything in the notebook and even helped the circus escape disaster. That day, just as the freak performance ended, 4 police cars suddenly approached from the distance. Sensing trouble, Stanton quickly alerted Clem. By then, Sheriff Jedediah had already arrived near the stage, declaring the act indecent and threatening to arrest everyone. Noticing that Jedediah's right shoe had an unusually thick heel, Stanton immediately thought of a plan.
Jedediah Judd.
Before Jedediah could figure out how Stanton knew his name, Stanton pulled him aside. He said that when you were a child, you suffered a serious illness, and a woman named Mary once reached out to help you, and that woman was Jedediah's mother. In disbelief, Jedediah pulled out his mother's keepsake. Stanton seized the moment and continued, "I am a medium. Your mother, from heaven, wishes me to tell you. Her only hope is that you show kindness and do not abuse your power." Jedediah believed every word. How could he go against his mother's wishes? He quickly ordered his men to withdraw. Just like that, the circus's crisis crisis was resolved, and Stanton became their hero. Clem eagerly asked him how he had done it. It turned out that when the officers entered, Stanton had deliberately bumped into one of them and caught a glimpse of the search warrant. It had Jedediah's name on it. Also, Jedediah's right shoe had an unusually thick heel, which indicated he'd had polio as a child. As for the mother's name, who hasn't known at least a few women named Mary in their life? Soon after, the circus's most beautiful girl, Molly, approached Stanton. Impressed by his cleverness, she proposed they run away together. It just so happened, Stanton was also unwilling to remain stuck in this place. The next day, they packed their belongings and set out for the nearest bustling city. Before long, Molly became both Stanton's wife and his assistant, memorizing the secret code every day. Using their mind-reading act, they quickly made a name for themselves in the city. Until one day, during an upper-class banquet, Stanton's mind-reading trick was seen through in an instant. A woman strode forward and told Molly to remain silent.
What is inside the bag? You say you're genuine, and I say you use verbal signals of some sort to communicate between the two of you.
Stanton's explanations sounded weak and unconvincing. The woman pressed harder, relentless. Cornered, Stanton paced the stage to calm himself, and suddenly he had an answer. He declared that the woman's handbag contained a small pistol and described its appearance and details with perfect accuracy. Ritter was stunned for a moment. Trying to maintain composure, she returned to her seat, but Stanton was just getting started.
You are an only child, are you not? Your mother died when you were young?
Ritter was completely shaken. Stanton had revealed her background with astonishing accuracy. Then Stanton turned his attention to Judge Kimball, who had recently lost his son.
He's right beside you. He wants you to know how proud he is of you.
When the performance ended, the room erupted in applause. Stanton became famous overnight. Not long after, Judge Kimball sought Stanton out again, offering a large sum to invite him to his home for a seance. Ritter, it turned out, was Judge Kimball's psychiatrist. Stanton wanted to partner with her. To gain her trust, he revealed what had really happened that night, and Stanton had deduced that Ritter was single because there was no ring mark on her finger, so she would likely carry a small pistol for self-defense. As for her background, Stanton had read it all through his understanding of human nature. Even someone as cautious as Ritter was impressed by Stanton's skill and agreed to work with him. After learning the details about Kimball's late son, Stanton immediately visited Kimball's home. Upon entering, Stanton clearly stated the boy's cause of death, age, and personality. Grieving Mrs. Kimball believed Stanton could help her contact her son's spirit and poured out her longing and sorrow. To make the act more convincing, Stanton even spoke to Mrs. Kimball in the boy's tone. But what they didn't know was that Stanton had already thoroughly investigated their family. It was all an elaborate performance, manipulating them with ease. Afterward, Stanton deposited a large sum of money he had conned into Ritter's account, hoping to deepen their partnership. Because Judge Kimball was just a warm-up, Stanton's real target was the city's richest man, Grindle. If he could convince Grindle, he'd be set for life. But the risks were just as high. One small mistake could cost him everything. Before long, Stanton arrived at a vast estate, heavily guarded with strict rules. Even though he had gathered plenty of information, it was still nerve-wracking. After passing through multiple security checks, he finally met Grindle. But Stanton hadn't expected Grindle to be a staunch atheist, one who didn't believe in any of this supernatural nonsense. To expose Stanton in front of everyone, Grindle had a lie detector brought in. This device could detect lies through blood pressure, muscle contractions, and heart rate. The first few questions were simple. What is your name? What day is it today? Stanton answered fluently. But then came the question, does true psychic ability exist?
Can you read minds?
Yes, I can.
Brief.
The machine showed that Stanton was lying. His eyes instinctively darted toward Grindle, thinking, I'm done for. He quickly closed his eyes, forcing himself to calm down. If he could convince even himself of the lie, it would become the truth. At this moment, Stanton's vital signs gradually stabilized, leaving Grindle in disbelief. Stanton went on to say that there was the spirit of a woman in this room who had been driven to her death with an unborn child lost along with her. Grindle was stunned and ordered the lie detector test to be stopped. Stanton had made it through the test, narrowly but safely. Afterwards, he went to see Ritter again, telling her he now had full confidence he could win Grindle over, but he needed even more information about him. But at this point, Ritter hesitated. There was some information that only she could provide, and if they were exposed, they would both surely die. Yet Stanton had no intention of backing down. While Ritter went to the restroom, he secretly made a copy of her safe key. Later that night, Stanton snuck into the clinic again and found Grindle's medical records inside the safe. Following the clues, he then located the cemetery where Grindle had secretly buried a girl named Dory. Stanton bribed the cemetery temporary caretaker and gathered more information about Dory. With this, Grindle was like an open book, completely manipulated by Stanton. And with each meeting, Stanton earned a handsome payment. But soon, Grindle was no longer satisfied with this. He wanted to truly see the deceased Dory in person. And if Stanton couldn't deliver, the consequences would be more than he could bear. Cornered, Stanton knew he was in grave danger. Back home, he pinned all his hopes on his wife, as he had noticed that Dory and Molly looked very much alike. If Molly dressed the same and styled her hair just right, she could pass for Dory. Once everything was ready, they drove to the rear entrance of the estate. Stanton instructed Grindle to be at the park path precisely at 8 o'clock. To ensure the plan's success, he told Grindle to dismiss his bodyguards. At the appointed spot, Grindle, full of remorse, confessed that he should not have killed. It turned out Grindle was a twisted killer who had murdered many young women in cruel ways, trying to vent his grief over losing his beloved. Just then, Molly appeared, dressed in blood-stained clothes, walking slowly toward him. Grindle trembled with excitement. Following the plan, Stanton had Grindle kneel in prayer, giving Molly the chance to leave. But unexpectedly, Grindle insisted on reuniting with his love. He rushed forward and grabbed Molly, immediately sensing something was wrong. Standing up, he realized this was someone he didn't know. In an instant, Grindle understood he had been deceived. As Grindle flew into a rage, Stanton had no choice but to fight back, punching Grindle again and again until the bodyguards arrived with guns drawn. Stanton hurriedly fled with Molly in the car, but the bodyguards gave chase. In desperation, he reversed and rammed one of them. Ignoring Molly's pleas, he insisted on killing the bodyguard. Soon they escaped into a narrow alley. There, Stanton smashed all the car windows. Molly could no longer tolerate Stanton's greed and brutality. She chose to leave him. But Stanton still had one last hope. He ran to Ritter's place to retrieve his money, planning to flee. Before leaving, he opened the money box, only to find it had been swapped out for small bills. It turned out Ritter had been using him all along, subtly pushing him to kill Grindle. She herself had once been one of Grindle's victims, with a long knife scar across her chest. In the end, she planned to frame Stanton as a mentally unstable man attempting a break-in, and by shooting him in the ear, she could clear herself of any suspicion. Enraged, Stanton tried to strangle Ritter with a telephone cord, but just then, security arrived. Stanton had no choice but to flee in panic. He eventually ended up in a livestock car at the train station. A few months later, he had become a disheveled, filthy drifter, drinking every day just to stay alive, even trading his father's watch for alcohol. With nowhere left to go, he stumbled into another circus and begged the owner for work, saying he could perform mind reading. But the circus owner replied there were no permanent jobs, only a temporary one, and handed Stanton a drink. At that moment, Stanton remembered Clem's story of how turning a man into a freak began, with a drink laced with forbidden substances. He knew exactly what would happen if he drank it, but he drank it anyway.